Welcome to Dr. George Belle Speaks. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. In this series, we call attention to a topical issue and we allow our guest to speak. What is the topical issue this week, Dr. George Belle?
Some discussion has started up about whether Samuel Jackman Prescott should be recognized in relation to Heroes Square. This has been said by, for instance, the historian Morris Greenwich, and I would wish at this time I would give my support that even though the other monuments have been selected, is that the Samuel Jackman Prescott, as in terms of our national heroes, is justified in, the argument is justifiable in relation to saying that he probably should be given a place, a special place in Heroes Square. And I just want to then address some of the issues as to how I would reach that point of view. Initially, I would just say that I support the arguments that have been put in favor of national hero Samuel Jackman Prescott. I noted the programs that were put on by CBC television in relation to the monuments. There were two of them that I am conscious of, in which people were exposed to the proposed designs, and then secondly, the decision on which one had won favor to be constructed in Heroes Square. Mr. Devenish, who apparently was in charge of the whole operation, he referred first to the National Heroes Act of 1998 and said that these things had really cascaded down from that. And essentially what was being addressed specifically was that Nelson was removed from what was originally Trafalgar Square, then became Heroes Square, after being there for about 200 years. And therefore there was a question as to what should replace him. And Mr. Devenish went through the criteria on which the thing should be, on which the decision and the choices were made. And he spoke about the monument being in the context of the UNESCO World Heritage Site in terms of Bridgetown and its fort and so on. He said that it should be commemorative of endurance, resilience of the nation, survival, social stability, and so on. He said that it should be able to be an iconic landmark that will be able to withstand scrutiny, international scrutiny. And he then made the argument that it should commemorate the Barbadian family. And that seemed to be the element of the criteria that stood as an assertion. And it should be a space, he said, enjoyable by all. It should demonstrate the integration and building of family. And that seemed to be a repeat again of the assertion of the emphasis on family. And then he said that it would contribute to the increase of monuments in the country, and it should be a monument that could be sustained and maintained. Those were the criteria that he indicated. And then in the second program that I saw, the choice was made that a monument called We Loyal Sons and Daughters All would be chosen as the one that would go up. And this monument would celebrate the family, as all three of the proposals had. And the family stood in the center, and at the same time the family stood as people tearing apart the shackles of slavery. That is a very general description. Of course, it's more detailed than that. So I want to concentrate a bit on this issue of the family. First of all, let me make it clear that I'm not saying that the monument that has been chosen should not go up, nor am I saying that the family should not be celebrated. I'm not saying that the space that has been selected in Hero Square should not be the space that is used for this monument and so on. None of that. And I think it's gone too far anyhow, and I'm not a person of such authority that I could reverse that decision anyhow. So I'm just making some critical comments in relation to monuments. Moreover, the way that the case was made for We Loyal Sons and Daughters All and for the other two, it was well done. The criteria were clear, other than I'm saying that there was this assertion of the role of the family. Why I'm emphasizing this issue of the family is because I do not think that that assertion or that the concept of the family as central to the development of Barbados was critically discussed. Now, I have to be careful here that we don't say that we are talking just about the nuclear family, which people would say, well, okay, that's a Eurocentric concept. And therefore, if you're being critical of that, you're being critical of a narrow view of the family. But I think that even beyond that nuclear family, that the family, even in an extended form or in the form in which it was present on this side of the Atlantic, among most of the population, that it does not represent a stable, consistent, contributing factor to the development of Caribbean society. Indeed, one of the legacies of slavery is the destruction of the family. And it is that the majority of the population of African descent survived even with the destruction of the family. Now, this is not to say that there have not been important families in Barbadian development and who have contributed critically to the development of Barbados. A lot of them indeed were nuclear families. And they stretched through the planters, the free coloreds, the black middle class eventually. All of these, you can identify families as being present and contributing in terms of even politics. There are political families in Barbados, or families that contributed very extensively to the political development of Barbados. There are families that have contributed significant to the organization of land and estates and so on. And of course, there have been planter families that have been responsible both for slavery and post-slavery development. There was a work, very classic work, back in the 60s and 70s, done in Jamaica by Edith Clark, my mother who fathered me. And it was constructed on her examination of the rural population of Jamaica. And it essentially was recognizing the extent to which the father figure in what would normally be identified as the family had been disrupted. And as a result, the female had to play the role both of mother and father. And while Jamaica is just one case, it does capture, because in a way it is a macro case, it does capture a lot of the elements of that society that was an inheritance from the slave plantation society for the rest of the Caribbean, including Barbados. And I think that if you were taking an element out of that, it would be the essential breaking up of what most people would say is the family. If you're taking out the male figure, you take out the father. And that a lot of the families in the Caribbean were single parent families, and it was the woman. So that if there's a hero, in a sense, it should have been the woman as hero in relation to the construction of the population in this development for most of the people in the Caribbean, the role of the mother. So if we wanted to, we probably could have put up the figure of a mother and let the mother symbolize and capture some of the element of the family, but not surrender to the assertion of the family. So these are critical points that I am making in relation to that. And then we would have to look for a figure. If we look at the critical folk song or calypso of the most honorable, as he is now, Gabby, on the taking of Nelson, he ends up saying, put up a Bajan man. Now, put up a Bajan man in place of Nelson. Now, you can also put up a Bajan woman, but he said put up a Bajan man. I'm stressing the issue of putting up a person, because the monument that is selected is an abstract monument. And the designers and the artists involved said that it was deliberately so. It was deliberately abstract. And the persons that set the criteria said that they wanted the family, which is an abstract concept. Now, if we look at development, normally in development, it is a person that is chosen to demonstrate the elements, the issues, the nuances of development. You cannot capture that in an abstract. So it's not surprising that the person that was there that we took down was Nelson. Nelson is not an abstract. Nelson is a person. And he was an admiral, a military man of the British Empire. And he helped to uphold slavery, so that we know how he contributed in various details to keeping slavery in place. Likewise, if you choose another personality, that personality, if it's a busser, or if it's Nanny Grigg is not a heroine, but she could be made one, you're going to be able to say, this person's life, you'll be able to see how they, in terms of various actions, brought about development. If you look at some of our national heroes, like Mr. Barra or Mr. Adams, you can see how in their efforts, you can tell they contributed to trade unionism, they contributed to free secondary education, or whatever. They've contributed to the establishment of a Carefield campus, they contributed to NIS, and all these things are part of the struggle, and it is expressed through the leadership of a person. So people, you know, the outstanding leader of national liberation struggle in Guinea-Bissau, Amilcar Cabral, he said that the people are not fighting for ideas, for the things in any man's head. They're fighting for material benefits, to live better and in peace, to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future of their children. And that was to say that even though he was a socialist, he was not going to say that the people are just fighting for socialism. So that is, again, the important thing. And all of this is making me lead up to say, then if you are going to take down Nelson, then you have to, like Gabby said, put up a Bajan man. So you're going to put up a Bajan man, or you're going to put up a Bajan woman to represent the role of the woman in carrying the quote-unquote remnants of the family in relation to the upliftment of the majority of the Barbadian society post-slavery. As I said, you will have to make Nanny Grigg a national hero. I even think that Rihanna could be a representative. Now she's a mother too. And she would be looking up Broad Street as a demonstration of enterprise by a black person in the face of this whole street that was once the center of white power in Barbados, white commercial power, the Barbados Shipping and Trading, and right at the top, the Mutual Building and the Bridgetown Club and so on. Since they already made some recognition of Dr. O'Neill at the bridge and Clara Wickham on the boardwalk, that the two of them could be put facing the spot where they used to bring ashore the slaves. So they'd be looking at the wharf, Duncan and Wickham. So Rihanna would be looking up Broad Street, the two of them would be looking at the wharf, And then I said that Samuel Jackman Prescott, as the first non-white Barbadian to enter the House of Assembly, would be facing the Parliament. And that is the monument that I would have put up. But then I didn't make any case for it. I didn't set it in as any proposal or anything. I just said it. I just said that. Now, of those persons now, I think that in relation to the fact that it is Heroes Square and it is right next to the Parliament buildings, I still think that there's reason and justification for putting Samuel Jackman Prescott there. So let's say that we can put aside the others for the time being, although I'm not dismissing them. I maintain that they would also contribute. I'm not dismissing the abstract monument, We Loyal Sons and Daughters, all either. I think there's still room in that square if my monument went up then, let's put it that way. But I think that essentially there is room for Samuel Jackman Prescott. And this is because Samuel Jackman Prescott has played an important role in the political development of Barbados. He is a genuine, outstanding hero, even in that pantheon of heroes. And he would be a person representing struggle.
Absolutely. The good news is, although there might not be the erection of a life-size statue in the likeness of the Right Excellent Samuel Jackman Prescott, his image will adorn one of the steles in the square as part of the monument, We Loyal Sons and Daughters All. Let us continue to learn more of Prescott.
Prescott, on the 1st of August, 1838, said in the Liberal newspaper, speaking to Barbadians on Emancipation Day, "Fellow men and friends, I have lived to see you declared free men, and I hope to live to see you made free. Gentlemen, you cannot require me to inform you that it is not by declaring people free that they are made free in reality, but that it is by conferring on them such privileges as put some proportion of the power which you now exclusively enjoy into their hands." And he was obviously addressing that to the British and the plantocracy. Now, just as the apprenticeship was coming to an end, the planters did something in Barbados quite significant. They brought in a set of acts that were to almost like inhibit freedom, and if necessary or possible, prolong slavery beyond the apprenticeship. Even though the people would be wage earners now, but they had a way they were going to calculate how to manipulate that. And we'll soon see some examples of it. So they passed these 4 acts. An act to authorize the appointment of rural constables, so they're looking for police to deal with the ex-slaves, the ex-enslaved people. 2, secondly, an act to regulate the hiring of servants and the more expeditious recovery of wages by them. So that is to deal with the economic reality now of wage earners. So they want to manipulate that as well, so they put a law in there. An act to regulate the hiring of servants. And it sounds favorable, towards the former enslaved people. Thirdly, a vagrancy act. So they want to deal with the people that might be loitering and think about the place. And then they become explicit. The 4th one is an act for prevention of tumults and riotous assemblies. So they're expecting some trouble, and they put a 4th law in there. If you put them together, you can see what they're really seeking to do. So that is coming out of this apprenticeship. You put these things in place. Now, the Secretary of State for the colonies, who is the equivalent then of the colonial secretary, that is like a minister in the British Parliament, and at that time, because of the empire, he He is the in charge of government in relation to the colonies. Lord Gleneagle. This shows some tension between the British government and the Barbadian government. So he makes a critical comment on these rules. He says, these rules are not drawn up with the brevity and clearness which are peculiarly desirable in a law regulating the rights and duties of one of those relations of life in which the great mass of society will be placed toward each other. Her Majesty's government are of the opinion that for the present at least, the emancipated population of the West Indies should not be permitted to bind themselves by such contracts, and he's talking about the hiring of persons then, that particular act, should not be permitted to bind themselves by such contracts for more than 1 year, and that every such contract, when made to endure beyond 1 month, should be reduced in writing and signed by the parties in the presence, if possible, of a stipendiary magistrate, who will be required to subscribe it in attestation to the fact that the servant correctly understood the meaning and effect of the agreement. Because this act was going to say that if you were hired for even for a week, that meant you were hired for a year. So it was to try to hold people to the plantation that they were working on. The continuance in service without objection for a week cannot reasonably be construed into an implied contract to serve for 1 year. So you see the British disagreeing with the local plantocracy in relation to these acts that were established soon after slavery, soon after the end of the apprenticeship system. The Barbadian newspaper, which is a planter newspaper, captures some of the feelings that the planters felt were present as attitudes among the formerly enslaved people. And so, on the 10th of August, 1838, they are already saying the following, that the bad feelings we noticed in our last paper is spreading through those very estates where there was least reason to expect it. Striking work is spreading like wildfire. Who would have expected that people accustomed to the kindest, most humane, liberal treatment are refusing to work, absolutely refusing to enter into any contract for wages, which may subject them, if they violate it, to be taken before a magistrate, and yet claiming to hold possession of their house and land. That's a serious threat, the last point there about claiming to hold possession of their house and land, because if you broke what the planter said was the contract, they could tell you to get off the estate, they would take out your whole house and throw it off, and detach. They also would said they would detach your house, which is take off the roof. So this was to force you, by, if necessary, physically, to attend to their business with security, or else they would get rid of you. The paper continues, there's not only passive resistance, but it has come to our knowledge that there's an insolent bearing on the part of some of the laborers, a sort of defiance in their manners, which calls for some prompt, energetic measures on the part of the magistracy of the island. So the Barbadian newspaper, the newspaper called the Barbadian Planter paper, they're not pleased with the attitude that they're seeing developing among the Barbadian population. There's a memorial sent up to the Secretary of State for the Colonies by Prescott, answering what the kind of critique that is developing among the planter class about the freed, enslaved, formerly enslaved people. It's a pretty extensive memorial. I just take out a part of it again to let you get a sense of the language and the feelings of Prescott. He says that right into Lord Lenico. Constituted as society is at the present moment in the colonies with a large body of the laboring classes who have been long and cruelly oppressed and who have but just emerged into a state of freedom on the one hand, and with an influential and powerful body of proprietors or their representatives full of fears, jealousies, and prejudices, and still retaining to a great extent the power to oppress on the other. This committee, which was sending the memorial, feel, and Prescott writing on behalf of them, that they should not discharge the duties to which they are solemnly pledged. The committee feel that they should not discharge the duties to which they are solemnly pledged. They dare not exercise the utmost vigilance to detect and use every legitimate and constitutional means to prevent any attempt to reduce the liberated slaves, either legally or practically, under a new state of bondage, and thus to deprive them of the blessings of that freedom which has been purchased at a costly sacrifice of the national treasure, and which has been guaranteed to them by the solemn decisions of the British legislature. So he's talking about the challenge, and he's talking about the role of the British because of their investment in this movement to freedom. And that memorial goes on for quite a bit with the same type, the same tone. The planters responded to Prescott's position by suggesting that the people that were making noise by their protests and so on were essentially troublemakers, and that Barbados had been this great example of good treatment of the enslaved and so on. And they mobilized what was called a St. George delegation of laborers to demonstrate to the governor and the colonial office that there were people in Barbados, black people, who did not agree with the type of protests that were taking place. So there was a demonstration in the government house by 55 laborers of the parish of St. George, who presented themselves to Governor MacGregor as delegates when it addressed to him on behalf of laborers resident in that parish. The Globe newspaper described the process as follows. The delegates, 55 in number, most respectably dressed and well mounted, assembled at the station house of District B, and thence rode in procession two and two to the governor's residence, where on their arrival they were most graciously received in the long room by Sir Evan. The address from this spontaneous demonstration to the governor in large part went as follows, and it says, I'll just give you a little part and you will get the tone again. We, the undersigned laborers of the parish of St. George, being delegated by our brother laborers, beg leave most respectfully to approach your excellency on a matter of vital interest to the well-being of this island. We have heard with the utmost regret that a letter from the editor of the Barbados Liberal, that would be Prescott, has appeared in the British Emancipator, in which letter our employers are charged with improperly interfering with our rights as free subjects, leaving us less free than any other class in the island, and that we are exposed to fraud and oppression, and that such oppression is likely to goad us to desperation to rid ourselves of it, and such like inflammatory language. It goes on much longer than that, but that is what I would illustrate, used to illustrate this demonstration, saying that the conditions that they're working under are okay, and people shouldn't listen to Prescott, etc. However, apparently, a few months after that delegation went up, that delegation went to the government house, the actual behavior of people in mass around the country made the planters start to shift their position. In the Mercury newspaper, the laborers were no longer seen now as positive. They were bent upon keeping agriculture on the wane. They no longer saw them as insensible creatures. In fact, with respect to agricultural production now, the editorial said, it could be most reasonable, the expectancies of the next home harvest, as it is termed, are far from being brilliant. But we are consoled for the coming loss to many, when we consider that it would be mainly attributable to the frequent visitation of drought at an early period of the growing crops, and not any considerable defection in the predial population. The former insensible creature, oh sorry, this is where they're making the point that the people are okay. Okay, so just qualify that. That is the attitude that is there, saying, almost in favor of the St. George delegation. The former insensible creatures, which had called in the earlier language before the demonstration, were now intelligently marching behind their planter masters, to the disgrace of the liberals of the day. And so now the prosperity of the country is not on the wane, notwithstanding every effort in which has been made to sow and spread disaffection. Now they said that there, and then within 3 months of the demonstration, the Mercury is saying that the laboring class was again wayward and capricious. Its conduct would lead to cessation to a lamentable extent in the cultivation and manufacture of sugarcane, if the precepts of idleness and unrestricted freedom are to be the doctrinal guides of the peasant. The widespread cane fires, and this will tell you therefore what is also going on, the widespread cane fires further moved the Mercury to wax sarcastic about laborers reported to have been arrested for arson, peaceable fire raising laborers, and so on. But the Mercury is yet another of the Mercury that we just described the language of. That is also another planter paper. The only paper that is really liberal and in favor of the masses is Prescott's paper, which is called the Liberal. And remember that the term at the time, you're not going to go beyond the political category liberal, because this is early 19th century. And the early 19th century has to be associated with political struggles like the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution. These people are fighting for liberty, freedom, okay? And not for socialism or anything like that. Right? So to be a liberal is to be a revolutionary. And you will hear later on, Prescott will be described as such. Now the next thing that started to develop was, as a response to bad conditions in Barbados, was emigration. People started to seek to leave, to go to Trinidad and to British Guyana. And we see now that the role of Prescott in relation to that. Now, the planters again are opposed to they're opposed to this emigration as a tactic of escape from the plantations. So they say in the Globe, which is another planter paper, we earnestly recommend to the most careful perusal of a laboring population of this island the clear and convincing explanation which His Excellency the Governor has been at pains to lay before them in the public notice, which they will find in today's Globe, and by which they will readily perceive how shamefully their credulity has been imposed upon by their pretended friends, but real enemies, fellows who, with all their affected zeal and professedly disinterested anxieties to serve them, are in reality neither more nor less than selfish and mercenary kidnappers who are hired as such, at such much per head, to entice them from their homes, their families, and their friends to a land of mud, of sickness, and of death. They're talking about Guyana. Okay? And they're telling people do not follow the people that they're cursing, and in the language are people like Prescott. So we'll see how Prescott explicitly then eventually is saying that he's taken up that cause. So this is another element of him. So we saw him making a statement on behalf of the Emancipation Day. We saw him making positive statements or critical statements in relation to the legislation that had been brought in to control the population. You therefore see him at the head of the protests in relation to conditions post-emancipation. And now we see him engaging in policies that would relieve people from the plantation system if they so desired. Now before that, just to show the kind of intensity of the bad feelings towards each other in the population, the Barbadian newspaper had attacked the appointment of a colored man, Mr. Charles Phipps, as secretary for the island and clerk of council. This is a government post then. And in a liberal newspaper editorial, Prescott is identified as saying, "It is gall and wormwood, we know, to Mr. Plinkett and the coterie of old women of whom he is the accredited organ, to witness any advance on the part of the colored people. But did they think we were always to be what they would have us be, hewers of wood and drawers of water? Did they think that we were never to share with them the high seats and the good things therewith provided? They are maddened at the bare rumor of a poor but honest colored man being appointed secretary for the island and clerk of council. Is that the extent, think they, of our ambition?" And we should put that in the perspective of what our assembly eventually became in terms of the later people like Bradley Adams, Harold Barra, Independence, Republic, and so on. Did they think that that was the extent of our ambition? The punishment of the wicked frequently, it is said, commences in this world. And may it not be the decree of providence that Mr. Abel Plinkett, old as he is, and some of his equally old friends and patrons, may live to be damned with the sight of colored and black councillors, not merely clerks of council. This is our destiny, for this God permitted the founders of our race to be stolen and brought through much suffering and tribulation from their native country and place here. This is to be our reward and the punishment for the unutterable crimes of our kidnappers. So that is pretty strong language by Samuel Chapman Prescott. And on the emancipation, remember that early on there was a discussion on what to do with the fact that it was Emancipation Day and that it should be identified as something positive. And there's reference here then in the Liberal to a meeting that took place to celebrate emancipation and this meeting is reported in the Liberal, and it says that several respectable colored merchants, shopkeepers, and tradesmen of this town have come to a resolution to close their stores and shops and do no business on that day. We trust that all our brethren will follow their example. We cannot compel a law nor a proclamation to keep the day sacred, but it surely becomes us descendants of Africa. And I'm just saying this in relation to the language of Prescott as speaking on behalf of people of African descent. But it surely becomes us descendants of Africa to show by our voluntary act that we duly appreciate the blessing which has been bestowed upon us in common with our brethren late in bondage, and that we need not a law nor a proclamation to urge us to the respectful observance of the day that saw that blessing bestowed. We shall thus put the secret enemy, whoever he be, to shame and turn his enmity to our honor. And of course we know that nowadays we do celebrate Emancipation Day.
Well, Dr. George Belle has spoken. He'll continue that discussion next week at the same time. I'm Sherwood McCaskey.